There's a person you know. They have owned their car for 6 years. Same factory rims, same stock exhaust, same default gray interior that came with the base trim. Everyone around them has tinted windows, aftermarket wheels, a custom sound system. They have none of it. And if you ask them why, they will say something simple, something dismissive. It runs fine. But that answer is never really about the car. Watch closely enough and a pattern emerges. These are not people who lack opinions. They often have strong preferences in other areas of life. They know exactly how they like their coffee. They have a specific way of organizing their workspace. They are not passive people. So the absence of modification is not the absence of desire. It is a deliberate psychological stance dressed up as practicality. The first layer is control. Not the kind of control that demands dominance over others, but a quieter, more internal version. Psychologists call it locus of control, and people with a strong internal locus believe that outcomes in life depend on their own decisions and discipline. For these individuals, the car is a financial instrument. Every modification is a variable that cannot fully predict. A spoiler added today might cost resale value tomorrow. An aftermarket part might void a warranty. The unknown outcome is the threat, not the modification itself. Keeping things stock is a way of keeping the future manageable. But here is what most people miss. That same behavior, that same untouched dashboard and factory floor mat looks from the outside like someone who simply doesn't care. And that misreading causes real social friction. Friends stop suggesting upgrades. Partners assume indifference. The person gets labeled boring, unambitious, or worse, cheap. None of those labels are accurate. What is actually operating beneath the surface is a finely tuned threat detection system that most people never develop. Think about where this mindset comes from. Many of these individuals grew up in households where money was uncertain, not necessarily poor, but unpredictable. A parent who lost a job, a period where things were tight for a few months. Maybe nothing dramatic, just the low hum of financial instability that children absorb without anyone explaining it to them. The nervous system learns early that resources can disappear, and one of the most primitive psychological responses to that learning is to preserve what already works. Do not touch the thing that is functioning. Do not introduce risk into a stable system. This is not a flaw, it is adaptation. The brain that watched a family scramble to cover an unexpected car repair develops a different relationship with vehicles than the brain that grew up in abundance. One sees a car as an asset to protect. The other sees it as a canvas for self-expression. Neither is wrong, but only one of them will be misunderstood at every car meet they ever attend. There is another layer beneath this, and it is more interesting: identity. Specifically, the need, or lack of need, to broadcast identity through objects. Psychologists studying consumer behavior have identified a construct called the need for uniqueness. It describes the degree to which a person uses possessions to differentiate themselves from others. High scorers seek out rare, custom, attention-drawing items. Low scorers do not. And critically, low scorers are not lacking in self-concept. They simply do not outsource their identity to objects. The person with the stock car often has a rich internal sense of self. They know who they are without needing the car to announce it. This is psychologically mature in a way that is genuinely rare. Most people use possessions as shortcuts to signal belonging, status, or personality. The stock car owner either moved past that need or never developed it in the first place. Both paths lead to the same quiet outcome. Now, contrast this with the person who installs a lift kit the week after buying a truck, or the person who wraps their lease in a color they will never own permanently. These are not bad decisions, but they are identity decisions made through objects. The object becomes the message, the car becomes the sentence. For the stock owner, the car is not a sentence, it is punctuation. It exists to get from one meaningful place to another. But hold that thought, because not every stock car owner is operating from psychological security. There is a version of this behavior rooted not in self-assurance, but in fear of visibility. The person who keeps everything default because standing out feels dangerous. Maybe they were mocked for trying once. Maybe they grew up in a community where showing off was punished. Maybe they learned that drawing attention to yourself invites criticism, and the easiest way to avoid criticism is to remain unremarkable. This is where the same behavior fractures into two completely different psychologies. One person keeps the car stock because they are comfortable in their own skin. Another keeps it stock because they are terrified of being seen. From the outside, the two cars look identical. From the inside, the emotional worlds could not be further apart. The tell is in how each person responds when someone notices anyway. The first type shrugs off the comment easily. maybe even laughs. They have no stake in what the car signals. The second type feels a quiet anxiety spike. The attention feels like exposure. The neutral car was armor, not preference, and the armor just failed. Research in social psychology has explored how people in high uncertainty environments develop what is called behavioral camouflage, the tendency to blend in, to reduce visible difference, to avoid the social cost of standing out. It shows up in clothing choices, in speech patterns, in career paths, and it shows up in factory rims and untinted glass, and a car that looks like it just rolled off the lot 5 years after purchase. Environment shapes this more than personality does. A person raised in a neighborhood where flashy possessions attracted envy or theft learns quickly that the safest display is no display. That lesson calcifies. It becomes instinct. Even decades later, in a safe suburb with a solid income, the instinct remains. The car stays stock not because of a conscious decision, but because the nervous system never received the signal that it was safe to be visible. This is the part that makes the behavior genuinely worth understanding. Because by the time most people are adults, they have stopped examining the rules they live by. They follow the old instructions without knowing where the instructions came from. The stock car is following instructions written in childhood, instructions that said, "Do not attract attention you cannot control." And yet, for another person standing in the same driveway with the same car, the stock exterior is a trophy. It is proof that they did not succumb to social pressure, that they are not performing for anyone, that the car exists on their terms, not the market's. The same object carries the weight of two entirely different internal narratives. This is what makes human behavior so resistant to simple interpretation. The behavior is never the whole story. The behavior is the surface. Beneath it is a specific history, a nervous system shaped by particular conditions, a set of beliefs about safety and identity and what it means to be seen. The person who never touches their car is not unimaginative. They are not passive. They are not necessarily secure, and they are not necessarily afraid. They are the product of every financial scare that ever passed through their household, every social lesson their environment ever taught them, every moment they calculated risk before the math was even conscious. The next time someone looks at an untouched, factory-spec car and calls it boring, they are not seeing a car. They are seeing the autobiography of a person who learned exactly how much visibility costs and decided, for reasons that go all the way back to who raised them and where, whether to pay it or not. The car did not stay stock because nothing happened to this person. It stayed stock because everything did.